The original Centipede came out back in June of 1981. It was pretty revolutionary with its use of a trackball instead of the conventional joystick of its time. But fast forward 38 years from then, and it's pretty funny to see it go back to the joystick. As far as icons of the retro arcades go, Centipede was one of the more successful ones out there. The year after its release, it went on to be one of the highest earners behind the two Pac-Mans and tied with Donkey Kong. Not too shabby considering competition like that. Sequels are an obvious next step after success like that. Centipede has quite a few newer installments, or remakes, or remasters, whatever you want to call them. So let's look at the modern Centipede. Oh, sorry, this one is actually not the most modern Centipede. Yeah, my bad on the clickbait. But let's look at the most modern arcade Centipede game. Before we even get into the gameplay, Centipede Chaos can be set to either Redemption or Amusement mode. If you're not sure which it is, just look at the top here. If you see a Win Big Ticket sign, it's probably on the Redemption mode. While the Amusement mode is fun in its own right, we will be focusing on the Redemption mode for this video. This is one of the most elaborate Redemption games out there. But to grossly oversimplify it, the game is just an endurance run of 10 levels that have 4 bosses. You earn points by blasting the enemies, and these points get converted over to tickets. The amount you'll earn depends on the arcade's configuration. You'll get 3 lives throughout the game, and if you lose them, you can pay to pick up where you left off. Before we walk through the stages, we should talk about the enemies that inhabit them. We'll start with the franchise veterans here. The most obvious one would be the Centipedes themselves. These guys just rove around left and right, and they bounce down one position on the Y-axis if they hit a wall or a mushroom. When you shoot the Centipede's head, this will force them down one position on the Y-axis. If you shoot the middle of the Centipede, you'll make it fork off into 2 smaller ones. So I find shooting from the tail to the head is the best idea. These ones here are the fleas, and they behave similarly to their original appearance in Centipede. They just fall downwards on the screen, leaving a trail of mushrooms. Another one you'll see are the spiders. They just zoom across the screen in diagonals. The earlier leveled ones are much slower, but they will speed up and come in larger numbers further on. But usually these guys aren't threatening. So that's all from the returning cast of the original game. Looks like only the scorpion got left behind. But going back to the topic of threats, here are the wasps. These newcomers can do one of 2 things. They can immediately lock onto you and start homing in, or they'll do this theatrical loop on the screen before locking onto you. You'll notice their speed has exponential growth to it the longer they home in on you. You can break this momentum by using your movement to bait them into your old position. When they collide with the floor, you'll see them slow down and bounce upwards, so use this opportunity to take them out. So these guys, what even are they? I don't know, I originally thought they were moths, but the more I'm looking at them, I think they're fireflies. Yeah, that looks about right. Anyways, these fireflies just fly down diagonally from either of the top corners. Most of the enemies in this game have a sound cue when they spawn, but these guys spend so little time on the screen that it's important to recognize this sound cue. Another newcomer are these ants. They come in groups with a swarm of them coming in from left and right, with another army coming in from the top shortly after. And the final enemy we're going to talk about are these beetle-looking guys. They move at a slower but constant speed while they lock onto your position. These guys are explosive, and that's both good and bad. It can work in your favor as their explosion will hit mushrooms and other enemy insects. But this means you need to path carefully around them. You need to envision a circle around them as a dead zone. Don't blow them up unless you're in a safe range. Otherwise, don't be afraid to run from them, even if that means going up and around them. If you flee from them long enough, they will just detonate by themselves. On their own, all these enemies are easy to deal with, but where the main difficulty of this game comes from is the strength these guys have in numbers. To avoid getting collapsed on by all of these guys, I believe this is the order you should be following in fighting them. Obviously you want to blast everything, but working in this order is the safest way to do so. After all, clearing all the enemies or despawning them is how you progress through the levels. But don't rely too heavily on despawning, as blasting them will get you more points. To help you clear the insects, the game will give you 4 different power-ups. What they do is pretty self-explanatory when you read their names. Obviously use your main shot as much as possible for the centipedes, and try to save these power-ups for the group attacks. These 3 power-ups all work on an ammo system, so don't waste it by holding down the shoot button. Now this doesn't apply to the beam power-up. This one starts depleting ammo the moment you release your first shot of it. Oh, and none of these carry over to the next level, so use them when you can. The more you practice this game, the more the level patterns will make sense. A lot of the game events are scripted, but can have slight differences. Like an easy example would be level 2 here. Some days you get the spiders, some days you get the fleas. Practicing over and over again is the best way to learn the timings for when to save and use your power-ups the most effectively. You aren't playing on a hard timer, but you'll want to clear these stages quickly. Taking too long will make black wasps start spawning. They're like normal wasps, but much faster. If you're encountering these guys, they become the new obvious priority. The manual claims they start spawning after 40 seconds on a level, which includes the first 3 boss stages. And speaking of bosses, let's take a look at those. On level 3 you'll get Killer Wasp. This guy's a pushover, just follow their circular pattern and shoot. Sometimes you gotta move to the side to get the little wasps when it's safe. When you see the Killer Wasp hold back like this, there's a chance it'll lunge forward at you. To me this lunge attack feels like a 50-50. Sometimes they lunge, sometimes they're baiting you. As long as you're fast enough to get out of the way, stay there and sneak in a few more shots before fleeing. Level 6 has what I would consider the most annoying boss of the run. This is Night Flyer. They unleash this pulse attack and then move to one of 6 positions on the screen. They can also choose to stay in place and keep pulsing. It's not a hard fight, but it's very RNG reliant and forces you to play really slow. If Night Flyer chooses to stay close to the bottom of the screen, you can try to find very narrow timings to sneak hits in between the fireflies and the pulses, but I find it's much more reliable to play patient and just wait for a safer pattern to fight. Moving along to level 9, you'll get to fight Blast Beetle. This one's pretty easy as well, with a few things to look out for. Blast Beetle will rove from side to side and shoot fireballs at you. They have a lunge attack as well, which is indicated by when Blast Beetle stops shooting fireballs and pauses, ready to launch forward. The distance they travel and where they stop all feel arbitrary. There's no real pattern to follow other than wait for the fireballs to stop. Just try to follow their movement and shoot while being slightly ahead of them. The only real nuisance in this fight are the small beetles. If they spawn on the wall and not from the top of the screen, you need to immediately take them out or else you're going to eventually get pinched. With any of the bosses in this game, the moment you get their health to 0, the stage ends and you're safe from attacks. So if they're close to dead, it's actually better to stay and finish them than to flee from their attacks, assuming you can beat them first. It's important that you don't lose any lives up until level 7. I believe that levels 7 and 8 are the hardest stages in the game. As long as you played a perfect run up until stage 7, you're safe to lose up to 2 of your lives on these stages because Blast Beetle is a pretty safe fight if played correctly. It's not impossible to do a perfect run of this game, you just need to learn how to thread the needle in these harder situations. When you die, you'll respawn with invincibility for a short time. The manual calls this a shield, and the default has it last for 5 seconds. If you do game over, you'll find that the game dumbs down the overall difficulty on the first 9 levels. This is done by slowing down the enemies and having less of them come out in the usual rushes. Okay, so you've gotten past everything and got to level 10. Oh wait, my bad, level X. So this is the most important part of the game, the final boss fight with Mega Spider. This fight entirely decides if you get the jackpot. No power-ups, only 1 life, no big gimmicks, just you, your wits, and a pissed off spider. This fight can be intimidating, but let me share with you my best advice to deal with this guy. The fight can be broken down into 3 phases, with the next phase starting each time you lower 1/3 of its health. For the first phase, all Mega Spider is going to do is shoot web shots while moving left and right. These web shots can be directed diagonally left or right, or straight forward. They're also not mutually exclusive, so it can fire some combination of all 3 of these. Once you've got Mega Spider down to phase 2, they're also now going to start doing this lunge attack. You have plenty of time to react because the spider charges back before launching forward. Now down to the 3rd and final phase, Mega Spider will start doing immediate lunges without charging back. But the critical part is that Mega Spider will now start moving in the X-axis after a lunge. Throughout the entire fight, it's important to stay around the center of the stage to have the most options to react to web shots and lunges. It's very important to weave through the web shots instead of retreating into a wall. Never put yourself in a corner unless it's your only option. Mega Spider's final lunge is a 50-50 if they decide to sweep left or right, so it's really important you aren't cornered on this phase of the fight. You can intentionally bait the spider into doing the lunge attack if you get into their line of sight. If you do this, be careful of the web timing, as you can get pinched if Mega Spider shoots webs on the same frame they lunge. There is a setting in the game's manual about Mega Spider's difficulty. The two difficulties I've experienced playing on were medium and dynamic. I believe medium would look something like this. A very decent challenge, but can be consistently won with enough practice. Now looking at dynamic, this is where I'm still just theory crafting. The manual claims that this setting makes the game adapt to player skill. I've been experimenting with runs on this game. I've tried deathless runs, runs where I buy back in after getting game overed, games where I intentionally go down to 1 life before the final boss. But none of these have provided consistent evidence to the dynamically changing Mega Spider behavior. The reason I believe I'm playing on this difficulty here is that some of these runs give me a laughably slow Mega Spider like this, and then some runs where you gotta fight this thing. There was no clear correlation I can find between my gameplay on levels 1 through 9 and the Mega Spider fight. I'm suspecting the dynamic difficulty might instead be adapting to how many jackpots have been recently won, and not actually on player skill. This is the conclusion I've drawn, so apologies if it's wrong. But regardless, I still believe the really fast and hard difficulty Mega Spider is still a doable jackpot. It's a much harder fight, but can be won consistently if you don't have skill issues. If you come from a background of playing games like these, this should be nothing new. Now the real difficulty spike. I believe this comes from being in a multiplayer game. Yeah, you may have noticed this game has 3 different ports to play on. This makes for a pretty neat casual experience with friends, but oh man, do not play this multiplayer if your goal is tickets. The game will spawn more power-ups for each player, but also the enemies you'd normally see one of on a solo run are now appearing in doubles or triples. Oh, and the bosses will get extra health for more players as well. I can remember some runs that got griefed by impatient arcade goers. But honestly, this isn't a huge deal. Just don't be bad, play better, and you can outlast them. If you're greedy, you don't want them to survive Mega Spider, because the jackpot bounty gets split by each surviving player. I find that most of these guys that do this kind of stuff, they can't survive the final boss anyways. But if they manage to survive, then hey, good job to them. A shared Centipede jackpot with the additional points tickets still pays comparable amounts to some of the other viable games. As long as they didn't join the run right before the Mega Spider, I think it's alright. Just don't be mean, and if someone else is mean, don't stoop to their level. I know we focused on the redemption mode of this game, but let's just stop and forget about the ticket efficiency for a moment. This game, without any doubt, is the most fun I've ever had while farming tickets. Like, let's not kid ourselves here. We don't go to redemption arcades for the gameplay. Well, maybe you do if you're big on the competitive fighters or the rhythm games, but I'm not waking up with an urge to play that revolutionary pop the lock. But this Centipede Chaos game, it feels like an actual game. Yeah, it's no Majora's Mask or anything, but this stands well above anything else I've come across so far. It's fun. I like playing this. It has levels, lives, power-ups, bosses. You can buy back in and keep playing if you die, since it behaves like a typical coin-op game. But despite that, it's also a very faithful installment to the Centipede franchise, even while it's adapting to the Redemption arcade style. Regardless of ticket viability, a lot of Redemption games out there just outright feel like chores. Yeah, Crazy Tower is great for tickets, but sometimes these games just make me feel like a monkey in a psych study. After getting lobotomized from these games, Centipede Chaos is a very warm welcome to my ticket farming. Every run I do, I feel like I can do the next one better. Even after playing this game hundreds of times, I keep learning new ways to clear the levels faster, new methods to cheese the enemies with, new timings to save your power-ups for. I start timing the plays on my watch and imagine I'm a speedrunner, seeing if I can improve my split on the next run. But let's just cut to the chase. This is an easy S-tier game. And yeah, before you call me biased for this take, I'm just gonna say it, damn straight I'm biased, but I can defend this one. Assuming you don't have skill issues, this game is a very consistent jackpot that is supplemented by all the tickets you earned running through the first 9 levels. Even if they have dynamic difficulty and you've got the machine on hard, it's still a doable jackpot. If you do have skill issues, it probably goes to A and you view it as a rotational jackpot. But the drawbacks don't feel too impactful to me. I'll admit it is a pretty long time commitment when compared to other redemption games. The time it takes me to get one Centipede jackpot could have been roughly 3 jackpots in some of these other games. But what Centipede does better than these games, typically, is the ticket amount. Assuming that the arcade prices the cost to play similarly for all these games, you'll most likely find that Centipede makes the most when adding the tickets from levels onto the jackpot. This can raise an entire argument on what to value more, time or tickets. If you're on Team Time, you won't like this game. But if you're on Team Tickets here, you'll find that Centipede is one of, if not the best frugal option for consistently being able to stretch the value of your credits. Personally, if we can even spend our time at redemption arcades, I think we all have a bit of extra free time on our hands. So I don't think the long jackpot is such a big deal. The only other issue that feels a little more important to me is the possibility of getting griefed by random player 2s joining partway through your run. But even this one is not horrible, since I find these guys will usually fall to the start of level rushes. So don't be bad and just try to outlast them if you want the jackpot to yourself. I think the consistently high payouts you can get from this game easily quashes any of these concerns. Obviously, payout viability is going to depend on your arcade, but I find that more often than not, this game will exceed the base jackpot of the arcade thanks to the points tickets. But at the end of the day, we can agree that we've come a long way from this to this. Oh, and one thing I should add on for taking requests. I'll do whatever games you say. Redemption, amusement, prize games, or whatever else is out there. My only golden rule is that I won't talk about a game unless I've played it. So the only thing holding me back on some requests, honestly, is finding the games. I'll do my best to try to find them.